Seeing the chief commander's slight change in expression, the other Inhuman experts all looked at Long Duo nervously, wondering what had happened. Long Duo smiled and said, "It's nothing serious, just a little fellow challenging Dongfang Sheng in the virtual battle chamber." Challenge Dongfang Sheng? Is there a martial artist capable of that in our Dragon Mountain base? Heh, if I'm not wrong, it must be Lin Feng, right? He's the hero of our Dragon Mountain base. Only this little fellow can get so much attention from Chief Commander Long Duo. Lin Feng? He was indeed extraordinary to be able to kill two dire beast kings. Even if he can't defeat Dongfang Sheng, breaking the genetic lock shouldn't be a problem. In fact, most people thought of Lin Feng as the 17th Inhuman expert in the Dragon Mountain base. After all, it was very rare to see a martial artist who could kill a dire beast king at the level of a professional martial artist. Even in the entire history of the Myriad Academy, he was one of the top geniuses. If such a person could not break the genetic lock, who could? All of you take a good look. I'll transmit the scene of the virtual battle chamber over. Long Duo had very high authority at the Dragon Mountain base. Naturally, he could transmit the scene of the virtual battle chamber over. Soon, Lin Feng and Dongfang Sheng's images appeared on the large screen in the conference hall. Even the Inhuman experts were interested in a battle between two such geniuses. Hence, they all stared at the screen with intrigue. At this moment, Lin Feng did not know that his battle with Dongfang Sheng had already attracted the attention of the 16 Inhuman experts. He only stared intently at Dongfang Sheng's virtual figure in front of him. The last time he had lost without any suspense. In fact, he had almost been crushed without the slightest ability to resist. However, last time, Lin Feng only wanted to see the true strength of the Demon King, who was ranked first in the virtual battle chamber. He just wanted to see the difference. But now, Lin Feng was here as a genuine challenger. His mentality was naturally very different. He only had one goal, and that was to defeat Dongfang Sheng. Freeze! Suddenly, Dongfang Sheng moved. As before, he was still astonishing fast. In Lin Feng's eyes, he was like a faint shadow. However, in the past, Lin Feng could not see Dongfang Sheng's movement technique clearly. In the present, although he still could not see it, his sharp senses could perceive Dongfang Sheng's movements. Swoosh! He immediately moved his hand and threw a punch. One spiral force. Bang! Even though it was just one spiral force, it still contained more than 40 tons of strength. That was much stronger than when Lin Feng challenged Dongfang Sheng back in Myriad Academy. Just like before, Lin Feng felt a cold aura travel up his arm, attempting to freeze his entire body. He knew that this was Dongfang Sheng's ice superpower. However, with a shake of his arm, a powerful force surged out rapidly. The cold aura in his arm was also flung out of his body at once, and did not affect Lin Feng at all. As Dongfang Sheng caught sight of the scene, even though it was just a virtual image, a trace of surprise still flashed across his eyes. No one had ever been able to disperse his superpower with such ease. Lin Feng's punch was almost on par with Dongfang Sheng's. He also had some confidence now. As expected, I'm much stronger than before. Even though I don't have superpowers that can counter him, with my extraordinary physique and powerful strength, I have no need to fear Dongfang Sheng's superpower. Lin Feng's gaze was sharp. In an instant, he was full of confidence. After all, he had only unleashed a single spiral force. Blaze! Dongfang Sheng had two superpowers, ice and fire. The ice superpower was reserved and insidious, making it next to impossible to guard against. However, in terms of violence and explosive power, the ice superpower was far inferior to the fire superpower. Once Dongfang Sheng's fire superpower erupted, it surged like magma and erupted in a frenzy. The raging flames seemed about to burn Lin Feng to ashes. Lin Feng took a deep breath. He showed no signs of fear as he bellowed in a low voice, "Two spiral forces." More than 60 tons of force erupted. Even the simulated air in the virtual battle chamber seemed to be compressed by the massive force. Dongfang Sheng's majestic fire superpower, which was initially as exuberant as a volcanic eruption, was now forcefully suppressed by Lin Feng's powerful strength. Wherever the force passed, The flames could not get close. Boom! This time it was an absolute head-on clash. The flames exploded instantly, and Lin Feng and Dongfang Shang retreated immediately. However, Dongfang Shang was clearly in a much more difficult situation. Lin Feng had only unleashed 2 spiral forces, but Dongfang Shang was already barely holding out. Lotus of ice and fire. Dongfang Shang spread his hands. 2 completely different powers, ice and fire, appeared on his arms. Moreover, these 2 completely different powers were actually fusing slowly, as if extremely unstable. It was through this move that Dongfang Shang was able to kill the Dire Beast King and dominate the first place in the virtual battle chamber for so long. He was able to combine 2 completely opposite superpowers. Seeing this, even Lin Feng was inwardly amazed. However, Lin Feng was still filled with confidence. He took a deep breath and no longer held back. Instead, he fully unleashed his surging, invincible strength. 3 spiral forces. A strength exceeding 80 tons was simply terrifying. It was already infinitely close to being an inhuman expert who had broken the genetic lock. In terms of pure strength, even a Dire Beast King was far inferior to Lin Feng. Both forces erupted simultaneously, but for the first time, a look of shock appeared on Dongfang Shang's face. He had already known the outcome, even at the moment Lin Feng attacked. Boom! When one's power reached a certain level, it could disregard all techniques. This described Lin Feng at the moment. He could use sheer force to overcome all techniques. His powerful strength seemed to have even compressed the air to the extreme. With a punch, Dongfang Shang's lotus of ice and fire was shattered before it could even approach Lin Feng. The lotus of ice and fire was extremely unstable to begin with. Once it collapsed, how formidable of a power could it unleash? As a result, the mighty shockwave directly tore Dongfang Shang's body apart. As Lin Feng was some distance away and still had over 80 tons of suppressive strength, coupled with his extraordinary physique, this slight shockwave did not cause him any harm. After the explosion, the entire virtual arena was empty apart from Lin Feng. Dongfang Shang, so you're also that far from becoming an inhuman expert. Lin Feng muttered softly. An inhuman expert could exert hundreds of tons of strength with a casual strike. Lin Feng's strength already approached this figure, but even Lin Feng himself felt that it was impossible to reach or exceed that figure. Dongfang Shang was the legend of the Myriad Academy, the undefeated Demon King, and the strongest person below the inhuman level. Initially, Lin Feng had high hopes for him, but he did not expect Dongfang Shang to be much weaker than he had imagined. Perhaps it was not that Dongfang Shang was weak, but that Lin Feng had become too strong. Many thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind. However, no matter what he thought, he had succeeded in his challenge. He had defeated the Demon King Dongfang Shang and replaced him. Now, he had become the new legend of Myriad Academy. Success. Ha! Brother Feng defeated the Demon King and became the new legend of Myriad Academy. Feng Xiu spent 10 points and watched the entire battle between Lin Feng and Dongfang Shang, the Demon King. Although he was confident in Lin Feng, the Demon King was, after all, an undefeated legend of the Myriad Academy. No one had defeated him in decades. But now, Lin Feng had really defeated the Demon King. Feng Xiu really wanted to roar with laughter and tell everyone. Unfortunately, he was the only one in the virtual battle chamber. He couldn't even brag about it to someone. But no matter what, Feng Xiu knew very well that following Lin Feng would definitely bring him boundless prospects in the future. He was even a little smug. It was fortunate that Lin Feng had taught him a lesson back then. How else would he get the chance to follow Lin Feng now? As for his grievance from being taught a lesson by Lin Feng, it had long dissipated. He only had blind reverence for Lin Feng now. Lin Feng was a living legend. Feng Xiu was not alone. Many people in the conference room saw the outcome of Lin Feng and Dongfang Shang's battle. In the end, the conference room was very quiet. After seeing Lin Feng defeat Dongfang Shang with a punch, everyone's expressions turned serious. Although this was just a battle below the inhuman level, the Demon King was no ordinary man. Back then, Dongfang Shang, the Demon King, was unparalleled in his magnificence, and basically one of the most outstanding students of Myriad Academy. Now Lin Feng had defeated him head-on. The impact on them was just too great. Non-opal body tempering. And if I'm not wrong, it should be the third level. There's actually someone who can actually master the third level of non-opal body tempering at the level of a professional martial artist. Incredible, truly incredible. Lin Feng's talent is astonishing. How could he have such powerful strength? Perhaps he has superpowers too, and his superpowers are related to strength. Now that Lin Feng has defeated Dongfang Sheng, he might even be more outstanding than the past Dongfang Sheng. This is a blessing for Myriad Academy. Once Lin Feng breaks the genetic lock, there's no knowing how formidable he will be. We have to focus on nurturing him. Many people were thrilled. When Lin Feng killed dire beast kings before, it had only surprised these inhuman experts, and got them to think that Lin Feng was a very talented genius. Now, Lin Feng defeating the undefeated legend of the Myriad Academy, Dongfang Sheng, had shaken them greatly. In fact, the shock was even greater than when Lin Feng had killed the dire beast kings. Why was that? The reason was very simple. It was because Dongfang Sheng was a legend. Not only was he a legend at the level of a professional martial artist, he was even more of a legend after breaking the genetic lock. Dongfang Sheng's current achievements had already far surpassed theirs, and he had reached an unfathomably profound level. If Lin Feng had even the slightest possibility of possessing such talent, it would be a huge thing. In an instant, all the inhuman experts in the Dragon Mountain base increased attention on Lin Feng to the highest level. Chief Commander, what do you think? Should we report the situation to the upper echelons of the Academy? Someone made the suggestion. The goal was very simple as well. It was to make the upper echelons of the Academy, especially those powerful upper echelons, pay attention to Lin Feng. It would be even better if they could accept Lin Feng as a disciple, and could be considered to have given him favors through mentoring. However, Chief Commander Long Duo was unmoved. He said calmly, "The most important thing now is to retreat from the Dragon Mountain base. As for the matter of Lin Feng, there's no need to report it to the upper echelons of the Academy for the time being. We'll talk about it after he breaks the genetic lock." Everyone was a little confused. In the past, when they came across geniuses, Chief Commander Long Duo was always very caring and protective, even towards geniuses like Shui Yuansheng and Gao Tianxi. Why was Long Duo a little hesitant when it came to Lin Feng, and even didn't take him too seriously? Long Duo did not explain. He only heaved a long sigh inwardly. The others did not know about Lin Feng's condition, but he knew it very well. When Lin Feng was unconscious the last time, the doctor had given Lin Feng a full-body checkup. Only Long Duo had seen the report. The doctor speculated that Lin Feng only had a year of life expectancy due to his strange illness. In a year's time, Lin Feng might not even be able to break the genetic lock. However great his genius, what would it come to? Hence, Long Duo did not want to cause Lin Feng too many disturbances. He only hoped that Lin Feng could get through this year in peace. What a pity! Why is a genius on par with Dongfang Sheng afflicted with such a strange illness? Long Duo felt that it was a pity, but he would never spread the word about Lin Feng's strange illness. This wouldn't do Lin Feng any good. All right, it's settled. All of you can go and make preparations. Long Duo waved his hand. Everyone in the conference room left, while only Professor Wei stayed in the end. Professor Wei, tell me, what are you guys worried about? Long Duo knew Professor Wei very well. Professor Wei clearly didn't say everything just now. Professor Wei's expression was solemn as he said in a low voice, "Chief Commander, it's necessary to speed up the retreat. I have a terrible premonition about these new dire beasts. They're even more terrifying than predators." Premonition? Not entirely. They're different from any of the predators I've studied before, so I'd like to remind the Chief Commander. Long Duo nodded and said, "Professor Wei, once you discover anything from researching the fleshworm dire beasts, you must report to me immediately. Understand." With that, Professor Wei stood up and left the conference room. Long Duo shook his head, but he had mixed feelings. The instability of the Dragon Mountain base, coupled with the Lin Feng's matter, put him in a very poor mood. He only hoped that they could retreat soon without any accidents. In a huge underground tunnel in the vast mountains, Magma was surging vaguely, even bubbling with searing heat, as if it would erupt at any moment. Yet a naked man leaped into the magma. The terrifying temperature in the magma would probably reduce even a piece of steel to molten iron in an instant, let alone a body of flesh and blood. However, after the man had leaped in, he seemed to be enjoying himself. His entire body had sunk into the magma, leaving only his head above. Furthermore, his expression was very calm. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, the man seemed to be enjoying staying in the magma. He stayed there for a few hours without any intention of getting up. Suddenly, hurried footsteps came from the underground tunnel. A man in fiery red armor walked in and said to the figure in the magma, "Boss, a little fellow defeated you in the virtual battle chamber." "Defeated me?" The man in the magma suddenly opened his eyes, and the magma surrounding him started bubbling vigorously. "That's right. It's a little fellow called Lin Feng." "Lin Feng? Interesting little fellow. Gather his information. He's got good potential if he could beat my strongest attack back then, the Lotus of Ice and Fire." "Boss, you've misjudged him this time. He's indeed quite talented, but according to my investigation, he's in a lot of trouble now. He's been afflicted with a strange illness since he was young, and after fighting dire beasts with his life at the Dragon Mountain base, it's very likely that he only has 1 year left to live." "Strange illness? What a pity. If he can't break the genetic lock, all that is ultimately for naught." With that, the man closed his eyes again and soaked himself in the magma in silence. When Lin Feng walked out of the virtual battle chamber, he immediately saw Feng Xiu's passionate gaze. "Brother Feng, you're really amazing. You were actually able to defeat Dongfang Shang, the Demon King. Now, Brother Feng is #1 in the virtual battle chamber." What an honor! Even now, Feng Xiu was still in a state of excitement. He thought about how shocking it would be if someone challenged the person ranked first in the future and discovered that it was Lin Feng. He was following Lin Feng now, and could also become a hot topic of discussion in the future. Lin Feng's feelings were very complicated. He felt neither excitement, nor any sense of success and fame. Instead, he heaved a long sigh of relief. This could also be considered as making up for his previous regret. Right now, he had already challenged the virtual battle chamber. Even the various attributes of his body had reached their limits. There wasn't much point in continuing to temper his body. Furthermore, he only had a year left to live. Hence, Lin Feng only had one goal now. He would only do one thing, and that was to break the genetic lock. "Feng Xiu, I won't be going out for this period of time. I'll try to break the genetic lock. Help me gather all the information regarding breaking the genetic lock." Feng Xiu nodded excitedly and said, "Don't worry, Brother Feng. You've already become the #1 person in the virtual battle chamber. There are indeed no more regrets. Breaking the genetic lock should be your top priority. I'll help to gather the information for you." Lin Feng nodded, then turned around and left, returning to his room. There were actually many theories regarding the genetic lock. Moreover, in the online shop of the Myriad Academy, there would also be some experiences of breaking the genetic lock by inhuman experts. Of course, all these required points for purchase, and these experiences were all very expensive. For example, even a random volume of experience required more than 10 points. However, to the current Lin Feng, a mere 10 points was nothing. He bought dozens of books in one go, all of which were some inhuman experts' experiences of breaking the genetic lock. Moreover, Lin Feng was not buying them alone. Feng Xiu was also helping Lin Feng to collect them. In just 2 or 3 days, Lin Feng had already collected a large amount of information regarding breaking the genetic lock. Lin Feng read almost all of this information. He also gained a direct understanding of how to break the lock in his mind. Breaking the genetic lock required seeing the lock, which was to sense one's own genetic lock. Then, one's physique would reach a certain level. In addition, with a strong will, one would be able to break the genetic lock. There was almost no difficulty to this process. As long as one could see the genetic lock, one would be able to break it. Then, after breaking it, one would not be able to metamorphose instantly, but require a certain amount of time to undergo metamorphosis. It would take as long as 2 to 3 months or as short as 10 days to half a month for the complete metamorphosis to take place. Once the metamorphosis was complete, one would become an inhuman expert, their genes would be restructured, and their lives would undergo a transition. They would now be different from ordinary humans. However, the more he learned about the steps to breaking the genetic lock, the more confused Lin Feng felt. According to the information, he had actually seen the genetic lock. However, he had yet to undergo metamorphosis. This was just too strange. Chief Commander Long Duo had mentioned this before. Once someone saw the genetic lock, they would slowly undergo metamorphosis. There would be almost no difficulty in the process. Why was it different when it came to Lin Feng? Lin Feng was also searching for the reason. Breaking the genetic lock is to stimulate one's potential. The human genetic chain contains unimaginable power, but it's trapped behind the genetic lock, and one has to break the genetic lock. However, I'm different. Could it be because I fused the genes of dire beasts? The more Lin Feng thought about it, the more he found it probable that it was because he had fused the genes of dire beasts. After all, apart from the dire beast genes he fused, he was no different from ordinary martial artists in other aspects. It's the fusion of dire beast genes and complete fusion at that. In other words, my current genes are no longer entirely human genes. If I can only see the genetic lock, that's just my original genetic lock. Do other dire beast genes also have genetic locks? Lin Feng thought of a possibility. If humans had genetic locks, did dire beasts have genetic locks too? Very few people actually paid attention to this point. Ordinary human martial artists were only concerned about whether they could break the genetic lock. No one would care about such theories, let alone be whimsical enough to pay attention to the situation of dire beasts. However, things were different for Lin Feng. Having fused the genes of dire beasts while gaining great power, he had to understand the situation about dire beast genes too. Hence, Lin Feng researched it online. In particular, he looked up the papers of some biology professors. These were all publicized online. The knowledge was obscure but shocking once learned. Dire beasts were also born with genetic locks, but the genetic locks of dire beasts were different from those of humans. Basically, the ability to break the genetic lock was innate to dire beasts. For example, demons were born as demons. In other words, they were born able to break the genetic lock and above ordinary dire beasts. As for ordinary dire beasts, trying to break the genetic lock was just too difficult for them. At least, humans had never come across such a thing before. However, there were some professors who believed that dire beasts could also break the genetic lock. It was just that dire beasts did not have much intelligence, and had not created martial arts which specially targeted the genetic lock like humans. Hence, it was basically extremely difficult for ordinary dire beasts to break the genetic lock. However, this did not mean that it was absolutely impossible for dire beasts to break the genetic lock. These were just speculations and had not been confirmed, but a thought seemed to flash through Lin Feng's mind. Others might think that this was an unreliable speculation, but Lin Feng vaguely believed in this speculation. Ordinary dire beasts were also able to break the genetic lock. Yes, that must be it. Although I can see the genetic lock, that's only my genetic lock as a human. I've fused the genetic locks of 4 dire beasts. In fact, from a genetic perspective, I'm no longer a pure human, but a chimera of human and dire beasts. Even if I see the human genetic lock and want to undergo metamorphosis, the genes of the other 4 dire beasts will still hinder the metamorphosis of my human genes. If I want to break the genetic lock, I'll have to break the genetic locks of the other 4 dire beasts as well. Lin Feng's eyes lit up more and more. This sounded like a fantasy. Moreover, if word got out, no one would believe it. However, Lin Feng felt that the possibility of this speculation was close to certainty. This was most likely the reason he sensed the genetic lock but couldn't metamorphose. Since he had found the reason, he would have to think of the solution. It would just be to break the genetic locks of the other 4 dire beasts, but Lin Feng had no experience in this aspect. Even those inhuman experts who had broken the genetic lock had no experience. After all, even those demons were born with the ability to break the genetic lock. How should ordinary dire beasts break the genetic lock? In all probability, even the dire beasts themselves did not know how. Lin Feng understood his current situation now. This was equivalent to 5 locks. He had to break 5 locks to undergo metamorphosis. As expected, as one obtained strength, one had to lose something at the same time. The world was fair. Lin Feng relied on the genes of the other 4 dire beasts to become practically the strongest person below the inhuman level. He possessed unimaginable strength among martial artists of the same level, and obtained the honor envied by the masses. Thus, if he wanted to break the genetic lock, he would have to work harder than other martial artists. 5 genetic locks were not actually as intimidating as perceived. At least Lin Feng had already seen one of the locks. The remaining ones would be the genetic locks of the 4 dire beasts. Although no dire beast had ever broken the genetic lock before, Lin Feng felt that since they were all genetic locks, there should be no difference between humans and dire beasts. If he wanted to break the genetic lock of the other 4 dire beasts, he would first have to sense the genetic locks of the dire beasts. As for how, Lin Feng already had experience in sensing the genetic lock once. How difficult would it be to sense the genetic locks of the other dire beasts? Hence, Lin Feng immediately took action. He kept recalling the darkness he had fallen into. Back then, he had appeared in the form of a human, which meant that he had sensed the genetic lock of a human. Now, if he wanted to sense the dire beast's genetic locks, his first target was naturally the wild bovine's genetic lock. This was the first type of dire beast whose genes he had fused, and which he had the deepest understanding for. This was especially the case since Lin Feng had comprehended the wild bovine genes. In terms of breaking the genetic lock, apart from Lin Feng's own genes, the wild bovine's genetic lock should be the easiest to break. Lin Feng spent 3 days collecting information and finally found the reason why he could not undergo metamorphosis. On the 4th day, he spent the entire day focusing on sensing the wild bovine's genetic lock. He had already experienced sensing the genetic lock once. Even though he was sensing the wild bovine's genetic lock this time, Lin Feng did not find it too difficult at all. He tried again and again. So, in his daze, Lin Feng fell into a wondrous, dreamlike feeling which he had no control over. He could feel the howling wind around him, but his surroundings were pitch black. There was panic and fear in his heart. He only wanted to run wildly. He didn't even know why he was running, but he couldn't control himself. The howl of the wind grew louder and louder. Lin Feng shook his head slightly. He looked down and discovered that he had actually transformed into a wild bovine. Or rather, he himself was a wild bovine. The wild bovine ran through the dark wilderness. There was a strong desire in its heart, and it was the yearning for freedom. Swoosh! After an unknown amount of time, Lin Feng opened his eyes and realized that he was still in the room. However, it was already well into the night outside. So the genetic lock of the wild bovine is the wild bovine's desire. It yearns for freedom in its heart. Wild bovines were only a very weak kind of dire beast in the outland. They could not even be considered dire beasts. Other dire beasts hunted wild bovines, while humans also consumed wild bovines. The wild bovines ran for their lives every day. They ran madly every day, but deep down, the wild bovines also thirsted for freedom. This extreme thirst had almost been etched deep within the wild bovine's genes. Even though it was already dead, even though they were fused into Lin Feng's genes, this desire was firm as ever. Breaking the genetic lock means breaking the shackles. I see. Lin Feng understood. He really understood now. Even when he saw his own genetic lock in the past, his understanding of why the genetic lock could be broken was actually half-baked. This was even the case for many martial artists. The reasons why they wanted to break the genetic lock and why they could break the genetic lock were probably unknown to most martial artists. However, Lin Feng understood after seeing the wild bovine's genetic lock. At this moment, he knew that breaking the 5 locks was not as difficult as he had imagined. Lin Feng did not rest for too long. He began to fall into a daze again. This time, he transformed into a unicorn. Unicorns loved their horn very much. They would even maintain their horn every day, because it was their toughest weapon, and the tool with which they could drive away enemies. Lin Feng transformed into the unicorn. It had only one obsessive desire, and that was to protect its horn properly. Next, Lin Feng transformed into the proboscis beast. Proboscis beasts were extremely strong, but their temperaments were actually relatively mellow. They hoped that all the difficulties in the world could be overcome with their great strength and long trunks. In 3 days, Lin Feng had already seen the genetic locks of the 3 types of dire beasts. He did not attempt to break the genetic locks because he did not need to. Once he had sensed the genetic lock of the last dire beast, he would be able to break all 5 locks at once. Only through this way could he break his genetic lock and truly begin his metamorphosis, restructure his genes, and become an inhuman expert. Lin Feng had never come so close to metamorphosis as he did now. It was almost within reach. Once he broke the 5 locks, apart from the incredible power brought about by the metamorphosis of his own human genes, Lin Feng was also looking forward to seeing what other special abilities the other genes from the 4 dire beasts would bring about for him. Lin Feng stayed in his room for 6 days. It was actually a little difficult for him to sense the genetic lock of the last dire beast, much harder than the other 3. This was because it was a brand new type of dire beast. Lin Feng did not even know its name. It might take a longer time. Just as Lin Feng was studying how to sense the genes of the last dire beast, Feng Xiao came looking for him. "Brother Feng, are you ready? We're retreating." Retreat? When did that happen? Lin Feng had been sensing the genetic locks all this time. Naturally, he hadn't paid any attention to what was going on in the base. "Brother Feng, did you not receive the message on your communicator? The chief commander and the leaders of all the platoons have already given the order to retreat. Dragon Mountain Base is not safe. We are to retreat to Dragonlith City first. We are departing today, and all of us must retreat." Lin Feng nodded. He really hadn't noticed. However, he didn't have much to pack. Since it was a retreat, he naturally had to obey the order. "Understand. I don't need to prepare for anything and can leave at any time. Brother Feng, let's go then." Lin Feng felt a little regretful that he still had not sensed the genetic lock of the last dire beast. Once he sensed it, he would be able to undergo metamorphosis and restructure his genes. Then his strange illness would be cured. However, the retreat would not take too long. Once they had retreated to Dragonlith City, he could continue to sense the genetic lock of the dire beast. At this point, Lin Feng was not in a hurry anymore. Breaking the genetic lock was almost certain, and there was no rush. Hence, Lin Feng and Feng Xiao left the room together. They discovered that there were already many martial artists gathered densely in the square. Apart from the martial artists from the 16 platoons, there were also some martial artists who had not arrived at the front line and some logistics personnel. This time, all of them were to retreat. Dozens of spaceships had long arrived at the base, and were receiving all the people in succession. "Wait, has Yushan retreated yet?" When Lin Feng saw that people were coming and going in the base and many people were boarding the spaceships, he suddenly remembered Yushan. "Yushan? Brother Feng, if you're talking about the Yushan who's 3rd on the merit rankings, he should have retreated already. The casualties in the hospital were the first to be evacuated. We already belong to the 2nd batch." Lin Feng nodded and said, "That's good. I'll visit him in the hospital after we retreat to Dragonlith City." Preparations for relocation were going on everywhere in Dragon Mountain Base. Many people were still somewhat reluctant to part with it, but this was an order, and no one dared to disobey it. Some of these martial artists were adventurers, some were here for their own martial goals, and some were even simple businessmen who just wanted to kill dire beasts to earn money to support their families. However, faced with the threat of dire beasts, they had no choice but to retreat now. In reality, humans were still at an advantage over the dire beasts overall. It was very rare for frontline bases to retreat to cities at the home front like this. In a short period of 3 hours, everyone in the base had boarded the spaceships. Only some research institutes and inhuman experts who had broken the genetic lock were left. The researchers of the Research Institute were organizing information and equipment. These were all very precious and absolutely must not be left behind. Since it was a retreat, everyone had to leave. A spaceship was even specially prepared for boarding by researchers of the Research Institute. Chief Commander Long Duo also came to the Research Institute. He found Professor Wei Yuan still busy in front of the computer, seemingly analyzing a set of complex data. "Professor Wei, it's time to leave," Long Duo said softly. It had taken him a lot of effort to invite Professor Wei Yuan from the Central Academy of Sciences. Over the years, he had provided a lot of help to Dragon Mountain Base. Professor Wei Yuan was already very exhausted. Even his eyes were bloodshot, but his gaze was full of vigor. When he saw that Long Duo had come personally, he heaved a long sigh and said, "Just a bit longer. Give me 3 more days, and I will definitely be able to research the new dire beast thoroughly." Long Duo gave a forced smile and said, "Professor Wei, I know you'll definitely be able to succeed in your research, but there's no time now. We have to retreat immediately. Once we arrive in Dragonlith City, you can research it however you want, but not now." Long Duo was the only one who could persuade Professor Wei Yuan. Therefore, when he heard that Professor Wei Yuan was unwilling to leave the Research Institute, he personally came to persuade Professor Wei into leaving. Wei Yuan still seemed a little reluctant. He frowned and said, "I've already made some progress in my research. This kind of new dire beast isn't that simple. Alas, unfortunately, there's no time to analyze the experimental data now. All right, I'll leave the base first. I'll do my best to study it after I return to Dragonlith City." In the end, Professor Wei Yuan reluctantly gathered the experimental data and led the members of the Research Institute onto the spaceship. Long Duo also got on the spaceship. He took a long look at the Dragon Mountain base below. His eyes filled with unwillingness to part with it. Although he was an extremely powerful and human expert, it still took a lot of effort for him to oversee a base. Once this retreat took place, the results of all previous efforts would be destroyed. It would be hard to say if he would ever be able to take charge over a main region again in the future. However, he had no choice but to make this difficult decision. If Dragon Mountain Base suffered too heavy a loss, he would only be held more accountable. The spaceships quickly started and carried the members of the Dragon Mountain Base towards Dragonlith City. The retreat of Dragon Mountain Base shocked Dragonlith City. However, the government had already stated the reason. It was not due to Dragon Mountain Base being unable to withstand the assails of the dire beasts, but merely a strategic retreat. As for what exactly was going on with this strategic retreat, some experts from the government would naturally explain it. However, only the upper echelons of the Dragon Mountain Base knew the true reason. Even the martial artists from Dragon Mountain Base did not have a clear idea. They had participated in the decisive battle at the front line, but it seemed like they were actually victorious and had not lost. Why should they retreat if they had won? Thus, during this period of time, there were a lot of discourse in Dragonlith City. They were all about the reason behind the retreat of Dragon Mountain Base. There were all kinds of opinions, but no rumors. This was because the government had already taken all sorts of measures. All those who spread rumors were arrested and awaiting trial. In this aspect, the government was very efficient. A few hours later, dozens of airships landed in Dragonlith City. Many martial artists finally retuned to the human city after a long parting. When fighting with dire beasts at the front line, all of them were mentally strained. Now that they had finally retreated, they could also relax properly. Lin Feng and Feng Xiu also alighted from the spaceship and were arranged to stay in the temporary residence of the Myriad Academy. Feng Xiu said excitedly, "Brother Feng, we've finally returned to the home front after everything. This place is much better than the front line. Want to go out and have some fun? I have a few friends here in Dragonlith City." Lin Feng did not take in the rest of what Feng Xiu was saying. He shook his head and said, "You go and have fun. I'm going back to my residence first." With that, Lin Feng left alone. Feng Xiu gritted his teeth. He knew that Lin Feng was hard-working, but he did not have that kind of persistence. He had been on edge for the past few months at the front line. Now that he was back in the bustling city, how could he pass on the opportunity to have fun? Hence, Feng Xiu left his temporary residence at once and went to his friends to go out for some fun. Lin Feng was indeed very hard-working, but this was because he had no choice. He did not have much time left. He had to break the genetic lock and restructure his genes as soon as possible. Moreover, he had already sensed the genetic lock of 3 types of dire beasts. Now, there was only the last type of dire beast genes left. He must sense the genetic lock soon. However, it was a little difficult to sense the genetic lock of the last dire beast, which was the fleshworm dire beast that Lin Feng had fused. Lin Feng tried the previous few methods of sensing it, but they were all somewhat unsuccessful. This was because he knew far too little about the fleshworm dire beast. It wouldn't even be an exaggeration to say that he knew nothing about it, aside from the fact that these dire beasts had very strong regenerative abilities. As for the rest, Lin Feng did not know much. After staying in the room for 3 consecutive days, Lin Feng still could not sense the genetic lock on the fleshworm dire beast. He could not help but feel a trace of anxiety, and was somewhat frustrated as a result. In such a state, it was even harder to sense the genetic lock. After some thought, Lin Feng decided to leave his residence to visit Dragonlith City. He had yet to visit Yushan. In his eyes, Yushan was one of the few good friends who was together in life and death with him. A friendship that had undergone trials of mortality as theirs was impossible to forget. Soon, Lin Feng arrived at the hospital. He had inquired about it. All the casualties in the Dragon Mountain base were sent to the hospital in Dragonlith City. Moreover, Lin Feng had indeed seen many injured martial artists in the hospital. These injured martial artists were basically all injured in the decisive battle at the front line. Most of their injuries were not very serious and were only minor injuries, so their faces were all brimming with a slight smile. However, when Lin Feng asked about Yushan's condition, he was informed that Yushan had been discharged from the hospital and left Dragonlith City 3 days ago. Wasn't Yushan amputated? Why would he be discharged? This patient was recovering relatively well. The patient also had a strong desire to be discharged. Naturally, we discharged him by procedure. Doctor, do you know where he's gone then? Think he went home to recuperate. This was all the information Lin Feng got. On careful thought, Yushan was once a proud martial artist. Now that he had suddenly lost his legs, it was certain that he didn't want to face other familiar martial artists anymore, and only natural that he wanted to be discharged. However, being discharged from the hospital was not a bad thing. He could rest at home and spend the rest of his life in peace. In the future, if Lin Feng succeeded in breaking the genetic lock and was no longer plagued by his strange illness, he would still have the chance to visit Yushan at his home. Just as Lin Feng was about to turn and leave the hospital, he suddenly heard a shrill cry of pain. Then, chaos erupted on the 2nd floor of the hospital. Something seemed to have happened. What happened? Lin Feng heard hurried footsteps upstairs. Many nurses and patients had run downstairs in a panic. Judging from their expressions, they must have encountered something dreadful. Quick, call the security office. There are monsters. One of the doctors said while panting heavily. Monsters? What monsters? The people downstairs were at a loss and did not know what was going on. The personnel from the security office had already arrived. From Lin Feng's perspective, they were all high-level professional martial artists. After all, the hospital was not an ordinary location. The security was rather tight. Since many casualties from Dragon Mountain Base were transferred here, it was even tighter than usual. The security office began to evacuate the people, then sent personnel upstairs. Bang, bang. An intense battle broke out upstairs, but the battle soon subsided. Numerous martial artists retreated downstairs, covered in blood and with looks of terror on their faces. Monsters. The hospital had long begun evacuation. As the martial artists from the security office retreated, the monsters that caused chaos on the 2nd floor finally appeared. There was a patient in a white hospital gown whose gender was no longer distinguishable. His entire body was covered in blood as he staggered down from the 2nd floor. His expression was extremely sinister, and his gaze was already unfocused. However, his hand was still outstretched, as if he was trying to grasp something. Thump. Suddenly, the patient's head exploded, splattering blood everywhere. A huge fleshworm slowly crawled out of his head. Moreover, as soon as the fleshworm appeared, it immediately opened its mouth and swallowed the patient's corpse. Its body also rapidly expanded. A fleshworm dire beast? Lin Feng witnessed all of this with his own eyes. His jaw also dropped, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. He could not be more familiar with the fleshworm dire beasts. He had killed countless fleshworm dire beasts with his own hands. Even the dire beast king of the fleshworms had died at Lin Feng's hands. Lin Feng would never forget the appearance of fleshworm dire beasts in this life, but what was happening before him? Was this how the fleshworm dire beasts were born, by coming out of a person's head? This was just too inconceivable and horrifying. Splat, splat, splat. At this moment, a few more fleshworms crawled down the stairs. They were all far smaller than the fleshworm dire beasts that Lin Feng had encountered on the front line. However, every time they devoured a corpse, their bodies would expand incrementally. Damn it! Killing intent burst forth from Lin Feng's body. No matter how these dire beasts made it out of human heads, Lin Feng's killing intent soared when facing these savage dire beasts. He immediately charged towards the fleshworm dire beasts. Dragonlith City, a temporary research facility of the Research Institute. There was always insufficient manpower in the Research Institute. Practically a majority of the personnel were here for Professor Wei Yuan. Almost all of these people were his students, including graduate students and PhD students. Wei Yuan was of high academic standing, and was also very strict with conducting experiments. When he arrived in Dragonlith City 3 days ago, he immediately found a place to build a temporary research facility, moved the equipment in, and got to work. For 3 days and 3 nights, Wei Yuan rested for less than 10 hours in total. He was not a martial artist, not even an amateur one. His energy was limited, and after 3 days of continuous work, he was almost on the brink of collapse. However, Wei Yuan insisted on staying in the laboratory, because the results would be out soon. In truth, he had always had the premonition that the new type of dire beast might be more terrifying than any of the predators he had ever known. Professor, the results are out. Oh God, this can't be. I've never seen a dire beast like this. A PhD from the Research Institute looked at the test report and turned pale. Wei Yuan took the test report from him. When he saw the long string of data on it, his face went white as a sheet as well. Even his body was trembling. Are you sure the data is accurate? Professor, there's absolutely no mistake. If it's true, then some people could no longer continue. If this is true, then it will be a calamity for mankind. Wei Yuan took a deep breath. He knew very well what this data report meant. Go find the chief commander immediately. All of you, stay in the laboratory and continue your research. Ensure there's no mistake. We must try our best to find their weakness. Though Wei Yuan knew just how difficult it was to find the weakness of these dire beasts, Wei Yuan quickly left the laboratory. He went to Chief Commander Long Duo of the Dragon Mountain Base in person as fast as he could. At this moment, Long Duo was actually discussing the follow-up matters with the government officials in Dragonlith City. After all, Dragon Mountain Base would be operating in Dragonlith City for at least some time. It was very necessary to be on good terms with the local officials of Dragonlith City. Chief Commander, I need to report a matter of vital importance. Ignoring the formal occasion, Wei Yuan rushed into the meeting venue anxiously. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. However, they knew Professor Wei Yuan, so none of them said anything. Instead, they looked at Long Duo. Long Duo smiled and said, Professor Wei, what's wrong? Chief Commander, it's the test report regarding the new type of dire beasts. We've thoroughly learned the nature of those dire beasts, but the results. Wei Yuan paused for a moment but did not continue. However, his anxious expression explained everything. Long Duo's heart sank. He knew that this might not be good news. So he bade farewell to everyone and personally led Professor Wei Yuan to a quiet room. Professor Wei, just tell me, what did your research institute discover? Wei Yuan calmed his emotions and said in a low voice, Chief Commander, we have been researching those new dire beasts lately. We speculate that they are very likely predators. Now we have confirmed it. So they really are predators. Hearing this, Long Duo could not help but feel his heart sink. If they're just predators, that's terrible, but we already have experience dealing with predators. However, the predators this time are nothing to be trifled with. Their cells divide very quickly and have astonishing levels of cellular activity. According to our research, after separation from the parent body, their cells can continue surviving for about 10 days. Moreover, once there's energy to feed on, they can even continue to divide and become new parent bodies. What do you mean? What I mean is that these dire beasts are parasitic. Parasitic. Long Duo's heart jolted. Parasitic. What a horrifying term. It was a kind of dreadful dire beasts that were once fantasized in science fiction movies. Professor Wei, this isn't a joke. Are you sure those dire beasts are parasitic? Can confirm that they are parasitic. According to our analysis, once they parasitize the host, there will be a period of incubation of about 7 to 10 days, or perhaps even longer. This all requires specific experiments. However, there is one thing that can be confirmed. Their parasitic abilities are extremely strong, and we currently have no way of knowing their means of parasitism. 7 to 10 days. How can it be so fast? Long Duo was ultimately an inhuman expert. He quickly calmed down to think about the matter carefully. Soon, a shocking thought appeared in Long Duo's mind. If this is a scheme conceived by the parasitic dire beasts, they retreated of their own accord a few days ago not because Lin Feng killed their dire beast king, but because they had already completed the parasitic process and achieved their goal. They were just waiting for our people to retreat into the city next. If this is really the case, damn it, Dragonlith City must be locked down at once. None of the martial artists from Dragon Mountain Base can leave Dragonlith City. Long Duo immediately thought of the worst outcome. Buzz. Long Duo's communicator vibrated violently. Chief Commander, there was an incident of a dire beast attack in the hospital. Those fleshworm dire beasts somehow crawled out of the bodies of patients. The situation is urgent, and chaos has already spread. Fleshworm dire beasts have been spotted in hospitals, schools, shopping malls, and bases. Seeing the content on the communicator, Long Duo's face turned pale. Even an inhuman expert like him almost fainted. We're done for. Only one thought passed through Long Duo's mind now. They were done for, completely so. In the hospital, countless patients, doctors, and nurses were panicking. They did not have much martial strength, and were completely inexperienced in dealing with such an emergency. Moreover, the fleshworm dire beasts that appeared out of nowhere were all very powerful. They were difficult to deal with unless one was a high-level martial artist. The fleshworm dire beasts were violent by nature and seemed to enjoy devouring. Their speed of movement was also very fast. In the blink of an eye, a fleshworm dire beast had come before a patient. The patient was a little boy, and he was still wearing a patient's gown. When he saw the fleshworm dire beast approaching, he could only tremble in fear. "Don't come here, don't eat my brother." There was only a 13 or 14-year-old girl beside the boy. Although the girl was also terrified and trembling, she bit her lips and hugged her brother tightly. "Sister, I'm scared." "Xiaoyun, don't be scared. Your sister is here." The girl hugged the little boy tightly. She cried out desperately for help from the people around her. But looking at the massive and hideous dire beasts, no one dared to take a step forward. The fleshworm dire beast opened its ravenous mouth, ready to swallow the little boy and the girl in one gulp. The girl could only hug her brother's head tightly as her body shook violently from fear. Even if she had to die, she would protect her brother. "Monster, die!" A deep bellow suddenly echoed through the entire hall of the hospital. Immediately after, a figure appeared behind the fleshworm dire beast. With just a punch, the fleshworm dire beast seemed to be impacted by an unparalleled force. Its massive body was instantly shattered into pieces, and its blood and broken flesh splattered all over the ground. The dire beast was dead. The girl was still in a daze. A strong hand helped her and her brother up. "Are you all right? Hurry up and hide. It's not safe here." "Thank you." The girl did not even catch the appearance of her savior clearly. She only felt that the person in front of her was like an angel who descended from the heavens to save her and her brother. Whoosh! The man immediately turned around and left, continuing to hunt down the terrifying dire beasts. Our savior, I haven't asked his name. The girl muttered softly, but the hospital was very chaotic now. Staying here was indeed unsafe. She could only imprint that figure in her mind before hurriedly running out of the hospital, holding her brother in her arms. Naturally, the person who saved them was Lin Feng. He could not stand by as tragedy unfolded. At this moment, Lin Feng had already drawn his particle saber, which he carried with him at all times. After killing a fleshworm dire beast with a punch, he stomped his feet and charged towards the fleshworm dire beasts like a cannonball. Lin Feng swung the saber. The fleshworm dire beasts could not resist a single slash from Lin Feng. He practically took them out with a slash of the saber each. Bang! Lin Feng jumped to the second floor in one leap. There were even more fleshworm dire beasts here. Moreover, most of them were patients who had turned into dire beasts. There were about a dozen of them. They were incredibly vicious and devoured people on sight. The largest one was almost twice the size of an ordinary fleshworm dire beast. It had already eaten at least a dozen people, so its body became extremely massive. However, it did not manage to withstand a single blow from Lin Feng either. Lin Feng decapitated it with a single slash. These fleshworm dire beasts all had frightening regenerative abilities. Only decapitation could kill them completely. Actually, these dire beasts were similar to the ordinary fleshworm dire beasts that Lin Feng had encountered at the front line. There wasn't even an elite dire beast among them. However, due to their powerful regenerative ability and the shocking manner which they appeared, many people were intimidated by them. However, as long as one grasped the right method, it was not difficult to kill these fleshworm dire beasts. After all, even if they had powerful regenerative abilities, they had not reached the level of the dire beast king from before. They would more or less be dead once their heads were chopped off. Having dealt with the dire beasts on the second floor of the hospital, Lin Feng left the hospital, only to realize that the entire street had been plunged into chaos. Dozens of fleshworm dire beasts had already appeared, and the streets were basically in shambles. Why are there so many fleshworm dire beasts? Lin Feng's brows gradually furrowed. Mayhem had broken out over almost the entire Dragonlith city now. No matter how strong his martial prowess, there was no telling how long killing them one by one would take. Furthermore, the appearance of these fleshworm dire beasts was way too bizarre. The way they burrowed out of people's bodies. Was it parasitism? Time passed slowly. The entire city fell into chaos. However, the upper echelons of the government and Dragon Mountain base were all gathered in the conference room. Chief Commander Long Duo had a solemn expression on his face as he said in a low voice, "The situation is critical. According to the current state of affairs, it has already been confirmed that those fleshworm dire beasts possess parasitic ability. Their incubation period is only a few days. I hereby announce that Dragonlith City is under martial law and military regulation. Once they've entered the city, no one is allowed to exit it. No matter who it is, myself included, no one is allowed to leave Dragonlith City without finding specific tests on whether we are carrying the parasitic seeds of the dire beast. Violators will be charged with crimes against humanity." Hearing Long Duo's order, the people below immediately broke into discussions. Everyone disagreed with this approach. This concerned their lives and livelihoods after all. "Chief Commander, you can't do this. If we never find a way to test it, are we supposed to stay in Dragonlith City forever?" "That's right. If we can't find one, we'll go down with Dragonlith City." "What?" At this moment, even those even-tempered officials were shocked. They didn't want to die, much less go down with others. "No, I object. Absolutely not. That's right. Even if the situation is urgent, it doesn't warrant this method. There are 3 million residents in the entire Dragonlith City. Are they all supposed to die? This is absurd. Absolutely not." The chief commander's eyes turned cold as he said in a low voice, "I've already ordered the other Inhuman experts to guard the station and intersections leading out of the city. Even if you disagree, you cannot leave unless you want to be punished for crimes against humanity." Everyone in the meeting room had grim expressions. Crimes against humanity were basically the worst felonies. Once committed, it would even implicate their entire family, and they would never be able to recover from it. Although they were very unwilling to throw their lives away like this, they did not dare to really besiege those intersections and escape from Dragonlith City without authorization. Professor Wei, I'll have to trouble your research institute for the rest. I'll deploy all the researchers in Dragonlith City for your command. Professor Wei, you must find out how to detect the parasitic seeds of the fleshworm dire beasts, how to effectively eliminate those dire beasts, and how to control the spread of the parasitism as soon as possible. The 3 million citizens of Dragonlith City are counting on you, Professor Wei. With that, Chief Commander Longduo stood up and personally bowed to Professor Wei Yuan. Chief Commander, don't worry. I will complete the mission, even at the cost of my life. With that, Professor Wei toured around and left the conference room. Chief Commander, what should we do next? Everyone looked at Longduo. They've already reported the situation in Dragonlith City to my superiors. As for now, immediately broadcast the news and announce the government's decision. As for us, there's no question. We will go to kill the dire beasts. After saying that, Longduo left immediately. There wasn't much he could do now. Other than killing dire beasts, he could only wait for Professor Wei Yuan's research institute to produce results in the soonest possible time. The streets were in chaos. Fleshworm dire beasts were wreaking havoc everywhere. Countless innocent ordinary people were fleeing frantically. However, these dire beasts could reach roofs and walls and get to almost everywhere. Even if people lived in tall buildings, the fleshworm dire beasts could scale them easily. Moreover, no one knew how the fleshworm dire beasts parasitized people. How could they guard against the dire beasts when they did not even know how the parasitism occurred? No one could be certain if they would be parasitized. In just a few hours, the vast Dragonlith City had fallen into chaos. Swish. After Lin Feng chopped off the head of a fleshworm dire beast with a slash, a middle-aged man in a formal suit suddenly appeared on the huge screen in the square. It wasn't just the huge screen in the square. Almost all the television screens showed the figure of the middle-aged man. The citizens of Dragonlith recognized at a glance that the middle-aged man was the mayor of Dragonlith City. The mayor's expression was somber. He said in a heavy tone, "All citizens of Dragonlith City, in light of the severe dire beast attack in Dragonlith City, which is still escalating, we hereby announce the order of the municipal government. The entire city is under martial law and military regulation with immediate effect. No one is allowed to leave Dragonlith City without permission. Violators are to be charged with crimes against humanity. Citizens, do not panic. Stay at home as much as possible. We have already requested reinforcement from other cities. Reinforcements will arrive soon. Also, our researchers are working at top speed to study the methods of parasitism and transmission of the dire beasts. I believe we will be able to quell the dire beast attack soon. Thereby call on all citizens and martial artists of Dragonlith City. You can pick up weapons and kill dire beasts to protect yourself and your family. All members of the municipal government will also stand firm in Dragonlith City and fight with all the citizens to the last moment." As the mayor's figure disappeared, the crowd on the entire street broke out of their silence all of a sudden. Martial law was being implemented in Dragonlith City, it was under military control, and they were not allowed to leave. Everyone knew what this meant. It meant that they were trapped in Dragonlith City. Once Dragonlith City was captured by these dire beasts, they could only die with Dragonlith City. For a moment, various wails and curses filled the air. The morale of the entire city had been broken entirely. Lin Feng naturally knew about the mayor's notice as well. He also knew what this entailed. However, unlike ordinary people, he saw things from the government's perspective as well. Right now, these fleshworm dire beasts could clearly parasitize humans, and the method of transmission was still unclear. If the people of Dragonlith City were allowed to leave like a plague or other infectious diseases, it would pose danger to other places. Martial law must be implemented in Dragonlith City. Moreover, those who left Dragonlith City previously must be quarantined. However, these were questions that officials or inhuman experts should be concerned with. All Lin Feng could do now was to kill all the dire beasts. Although Dragonlith City was in complete chaos, With the involvement of the government, the police, the army, and the martial artists all began to hunt down the fleshworm dire beasts on a large scale. Hence, the entire city gradually calmed down amidst the bloody slaughter. However, apart from the damage caused by the ravages of the dire beasts, there were also disasters committed by humans. Upon knowing that they would very likely go down with Dragonlith City, many began turning into maniacs. Sin also grew rapidly. "No, please, don't hurt my daughter." A woman with an attractive figure in professional wear was pleading desperately with a few men. "Hey, we can release your daughter if you want. Let us have some fun. Make us all happy and we'll release your daughter." A lewd and sinister smile appeared on these people's lips, causing the beautiful woman's heart to clench. "No, I'll pay you. Please don't hurt me." "Haha, what's the use of money? Do you know that our entire city is about to be destroyed? Perhaps in a few days this place will become a dead city. Of course we have to enjoy ourselves before we die. Haha, that's right. We have to enjoy ourselves. This woman is gorgeous. I heard that she's the secretary of some company's president. Gee, look at her figure." These men approached the woman step by step, and the woman could only curl up and clench her clothes tightly. It was an apocalyptic world. The entire Dragonlith City seemed to have turned into an apocalyptic world all of a sudden. There was no order, no justice. Only violence, killing, robbery, and rape. This kind of tragedy happened every moment in the city. Swish. Suddenly, the sinister smile of the leading man froze. Immediately after, his head lolled slightly to the side, before falling off all of a sudden. Blood gushed out like a spring. Ah, the woman immediately screamed. The man's companions also turned around abruptly, and realized that a young man holding a saber had appeared behind them at some point in time. A martial artist. SP spare us. It was a moment of confusion. We didn't mean to do it. These men's legs began to tremble. Although the order in the city had collapsed overnight, there were still some righteous martial artists who stepped up to hunt down dire beasts and punish criminals. "You all deserve to die." He raised his hand and struck down with the saber, killing the few men with a single slash. The one who killed them was Lin Feng. Along the way of hunting down dire beasts, he discovered that the number of dire beasts had decreased rapidly, but the number of crimes committed by humans had increased tremendously. They were almost ubiquitous. In despair, many people would go insane. Lin Feng would not show any mercy to people who had no bottom line when acting on their insanity. Desperate times called for desperate measures. He would kill them all. Furthermore, the government had also issued a notice regarding this situation. The police and the military were involved. Anyone who committed crimes were to be executed without mercy. "Thank you for saving us." The beautiful woman hurriedly hugged her daughter and expressed her gratitude to Lin Feng. "Go home. Stay at home and don't come out." With that, Lin Feng turned around and started hunting the dire beasts again. For the entire day, Lin Feng did not rest at all. He killed all the dire beasts he saw immediately, and killed anyone who went berserk and committed crimes. Lin Feng killed many and saved many at the same time. In the end, he had already cleared a few streets. At least those streets were temporarily safe. However, Lin Feng knew that no matter how many people he killed, it wouldn't be of much use. Only by giving the people of this city hope could the order in the city be restored. But where was the hope? Lin Feng did not know either. He was not a researcher and could not find out how the fleshworm dire beasts parasitized people. Even he was worried about the possibility of being parasitized himself. Back at the front line, Lin Feng was also a little lost. Occasionally, he would even pity those dire beasts. But now, looking at the hellish scene in Dragonlith City, he finally understood the significance of martial artists being at the front line. It was to protect the peace of humanity on the home front, and to protect the peaceful lives of humans on the home front. Buzz. Suddenly, Lin Feng's communicator vibrated violently. A familiar voice rang out. "Brother Feng, come and save us quick. I can't hold out much longer, Feng Xiao. What's wrong? Tell me clearly." As soon as Lin Feng heard the voice, he knew that it was Feng Xiao. Ever since they had retreated to Dragonlith City, Feng Xiu had been like an unbridled wild horse. He disappeared for a few days in a row, having fun God knows where. Unexpectedly, he ran into trouble now. "Brother Feng, you have to save me. I was drinking with my friends at the bar when fleshworm dire beasts suddenly appeared. I tried my best to kill a few, but I realized that there were fleshworm dire beasts everywhere outside the bar. We're heavily surrounded now. There are a lot of fleshworm dire beasts, and there seems to be dire beast lords among them. Fortunately, a few of us are martial artists from the base, or everyone at the bar would be in danger." Lin Feng understood as well. Feng Xiu was indeed in a precarious situation. Moreover, if even someone of Feng Xiu's caliber could not break out safely, there must be a great number of fleshworm dire beasts there. "What's your address?" "Annie's Bar on East Street." Lin Feng switched off his communicator and immediately ran towards the East Street as fast as he could. The bar was filled with screams and cries. The air inside emitted a highly unpleasant smell that was a mix of alcohol, perfume, and blood. Many young girls in revealing clothes were curled up in the corners, trembling as they looked towards the exit of the bar. Feng Xiu and 5 or 6 martial artists were blocking the door. Outside, many fleshworm dire beasts were faintly visible. Once they broke through the door and stormed the bar, the few hundred people in the bar would be finished. Even though Feng Xiu and the others were very strong, they could not withstand the sheer number of dire beasts. The few of them were all clearly injured. There was also a minor injury on Feng Xiu's arm, but he could still hold out. "Feng Xiu, you really know Senior Lin Feng?" "Heh, don't worry. Brother Feng will definitely come. We just need to hold out for a while longer." Feng Xiu was not a smoker, but he felt a little anxious now and had a cigarette in his mouth. Amidst the smoke, he began to brag about when he and Lin Feng were sweeping up those dire beasts at the base. "Feng Xiu, is your injury really fine? Why does it seem to be infected already?" Indeed, a small, white and swollen bump seemed to have appeared at the small wound on Feng Xiu's arm. It looked a little disgusting. "You mean this wound? This isn't a fresh wound. I received it during the decisive battle the last time. No big deal." Feng Xiu shook his head, giving no thought to it. More and more fleshworm dire beasts appeared outside. Feng Xiu was also quite put out. He had finally returned to the bustling city after much hardship, and was just about to relax with a few friends. After all, he was tense almost every moment at the front line. Now that he was back in the city, of course he wanted to relax properly. He came to the bar with his friends and even hooked up with a few beautiful women. They were just about to have some fun when someone in the bar suddenly turned into a fleshworm dire beast. Then there was chaos. Countless fleshworm dire beasts appeared. The bar seemed to have turned into an apocalypse all of a sudden. Feng Xiu could only fight, but he could only barely resist them. Even he himself was trapped and could not break out of the bar. If Brother Feng can arrive in time, no matter how many dire beasts there are, we'll definitely be able to break out safely. Feng Xiu consoled the other martial artists. Boom! The ground of the entire bar shook, and the door of the bar was fiercely besieged by the fleshworm dire beasts. Feng Xiu's countenance changed. He shouted, "Hold the line! We must hold the line. We can't let them charge in." Although Feng Xiu did not consider himself a selfless person, as a martial artist, he naturally had to step forward and protect the ordinary people when facing so many savage dire beasts. The duty of martial artists was to protect humanity. This was how practically everyone was taught since they were young, and when the dire beast crisis erupted this time, so did countless martial artists step up. Suddenly, a massive fleshworm dire beast squeezed inside. It opened its bloody maws and bit a martial artist on the head. The martial artist was instantly swallowed whole by the fleshworm dire beast. That was a grade 7 professional martial artist, but he could not even block a single strike. A dire beast lord. Looking at the massive dire beast, Feng Xiu could tell at a glance that it was a dire beast lord. Ordinary dire beast lords were comparable to professional grade 9 martial artists. For the fleshworm dire beasts in particular, they were not even ordinary dire beast lords. Even peak grade 9 professional martial artists might not be able to defeat the dire beast lords among the fleshworm dire beasts. although people like Lin Feng and Shui Yuanxing seemed to cut down dire beast lords effortlessly. For ordinary grade 9 professional martial artists, encountering even one dire beast lord meant immense danger. The fleshworm dire beast lord was extremely ferocious. After devouring a martial artist and a few ordinary people, its body only grew larger. The fleshworm dire beasts seemed to be capable of increasing their strength rapidly by devouring the bodies of ordinary people and martial artists. However, on the battlefield of the decisive battle, the fleshworm dire beasts had never devoured any corpses at all. Even a fool could tell something was amiss about the stark contrast in their behaviors before and after. It was very likely that the fleshworm dire beasts had done it on purpose. As for why this was the case, Feng Xiu wasn't sure. Perhaps it was some nefarious scheme of the fleshworm dire beasts. As a case in point, right now the entire Dragonlith city had been plunged into chaos. Feng Xiu was also a peak grade 9 professional martial artist, and he was a genius of the Myriad Academy. Having followed Lin Feng for so long, he had also obtained quite a lot of points, which were all converted into strength. At least, the profound martial arts he practiced were stronger than before. Swish! Feng Xiu slashed at the dire beast lord with his saber. The light of his saber ruthlessly struck the dire beast lord's abdomen, inflicting a huge, bloody wound at once. The dire beast insect roared furiously, and countless tentacles smacked towards Feng Xiu. Bang! 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 Feng Xiu utilized his agile movement technique and deflected the tentacles of the fleshworm dire beast with his saber. Then, he sought the right opportunity to strike and kill the fleshworm dire beast. However, the recovery speed of the fleshworm dire beast lord took Feng Xiu by surprise. The initially huge wound on the dire beast was basically healed in only a dozen seconds or so. It appeared as if it was uninjured all along. Although those ordinary fleshworm dire beasts also had a certain degree of recovery power, they were not as terrifying. Looks like I can only kill it completely by chopping off its head and dealing fatal damage to it. Feng Xiu's expression was very grim. He naturally knew where the vital part of the fleshworm dire beast was, its head. However, looking at the massive body of the dire beast lord, charging over to chop off its head was easier said than done. Just the dozen or so tentacles were enough to seriously injure him. He could not even approach it. What should I do? Feng Xiu was getting somewhat anxious as well. Now that the dire beast lord had struck, they could not hold out at all. The door to the bar was also slowly being broken down. Once the door was completely broken down, countless fleshworm dire beasts would pour in at once. Then, everyone in the bar would be doomed. Brother Feng, where are you? If you don't come soon, you'll probably have to collect my corpse. No, most likely there won't even be a corpse. All Feng Xiu could do was contact Lin Feng again, using his communicator, leaving behind his last words. All men fear death. Feng Xiu was no exception. When he was struck by the tentacles of the dire beasts, he felt as if his entire body was about to fall apart. He was sent flying before landing heavily on the ground. During his days back in the Myriad Academy, he had been so high and mighty. He was flanked by people everywhere he went, and simply insufferably arrogant. That was until he met Lin Feng, got ruthlessly defeated, and had his self-confidence completely shattered. He even had to accompany Lin Feng to the dangerous front line. Eventually, he came to the front line, but there, he felt as if he had been reborn as a new person. If not for the experience of fighting at the front line, he would never understand the true meaning of being a martial artist. Before coming to the front line, he had never even killed anyone, much less experienced such gruesome battles. He did not understand the significance of martial artists. If he had continued staying in the Myriad Academy, when the 5-year deadline arrived, he would decidedly be unable to break the genetic lock, and could only end up leaving Myriad Academy in dejection. Perhaps he would take over the family business and be an ordinary person for the rest of his life. However, everything was different now. He wanted to become a martial artist and furthermore to break the genetic lock. In the depths of his heart and soul, his ambition was to be a powerful martial artist. After all, he was very grateful towards Lin Feng, but at this moment he was about to die. Being torn into pieces or devoured by the fleshworm dire beasts might just be his fate as a martial artist. The savage and hideous fleshworm dire beasts had already stormed through the door. Several martial artists were ripped apart and devoured by the dire beasts. Blood permeated the entire bar. There are no more chances to break the genetic lock for me. But I don't regret coming to the front line. As he was on the verge of death, a smile appeared on Feng Xiu's lips. Swish. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning seemed to appear in the dim bar. It was so fast that one couldn't look straight at it. As the lightning appeared, the dire beasts blocking the door were split down the middle one after another, before collapsing onto the ground with a thud. Even the fleshworm dire beast lord had its head sliced in half. With its head sliced in half, it was impossible for the dire beast lord to survive. After all, not every dire beast was comparable to the king-tier beasts. This was already a fatal wound for it. However, this was not over. Everyone could only see that the bolt of lightning was vaguely a figure holding a saber in his hand. Every time he raised his saber and slashed down with it, not one dire beast could withstand a single blow. The corpses of dire beasts had already piled up like a mountain on the ground. Everyone in the bar was dumbfounded. At the same time, they felt relieved to have survived a calamity. Is that an inhuman expert who came to save us? I don't know. Perhaps it's some inhuman expert. Otherwise, how could he have killed so many dire beasts with such ease? The people in the bar were all shocked. Witnessing this scene, they had never thought that those hideous, frightening, and powerful dire beasts in their eyes could have such a vulnerable side. This was a one-sided massacre. Only Feng Xiu, who was lying on the ground, couldn't help but laugh aloud. Haha, it's Brother Feng. Brother Feng is here. Before long, all the dire beasts were cleaned up. Lin Feng put away his saber and hurriedly came before Feng Xiu. He took a look at Feng Xiu's injuries and finally heaved a sigh of relief. It's a good thing I came in time. Such minor injuries won't kill you. Feng Xiu had come from the Myriad Academy to the front line with Lin Feng. The two of them were not actually on friendly terms in the Myriad Academy, and Lin Feng had coerced Feng Xiu into coming to the front line. However, after being at the front line for so long, the two of them had actually formed a deep friendship. Lin Feng naturally would not ignore Feng Xiu while he was in danger, and so had rushed to the bar as fast as he could. Fortunately, he was not too late. Brother Feng, you saved my life again. I've lost count of how many times you've saved me on the front line. Don't talk so much. Although your injuries won't kill you, you need to get them treated in time. I'll take you to the hospital right away. Brother Feng, what about the people in the bar? Lin Feng glanced at the people in the bar, then said loudly, I've cleaned up all the dire beasts here, but it's very unsafe here. You'd better leave quickly and return home. Remember, don't leave home lightly. All right, thank you. Thank you, our savior. How should I address you? I'll definitely repay you in the future. Thank you very much. The people in the bar left in a hurry. Some even wanted to know Lin Feng's name, but he rejected them all. He had saved countless people, and he did not need their repayment. Lin Feng also picked up the seriously injured Feng Xiu and prepared to take him to the hospital. As they walked, Feng Xiu said, Brother Feng, do you know what's going on with these dire beasts? TM not too sure either. These dire beasts seem to have crawled out of human bodies. If I'm not wrong, they should be parasites. Feng Xiu nodded as well. Yeah, they must be parasites. I didn't expect those damn fleshworm dire beasts to actually have parasitic abilities. These fleshworm dire beasts must have started parasitizing people during the decisive battle at the front line. Pausing, Feng Xiu said hesitantly, Brother Feng, do you suppose I could be parasitized too? Lin Feng was slightly stunned. In truth, the methods of parasitism and transmission of the fleshworm dire beasts were unclear as of now. Anyone who had participated in the decisive battle before could actually be parasitized. Lin Feng and Feng Xiu were no exceptions. No, you won't. How could you be parasitized? Lin Feng shook his head. Even if his heart was heavy, he wouldn't say it out loud. Feng Xiu also said with a smile, That's not necessarily the case. So many people have been parasitized. It won't be surprising for a peak grade 9 professional martial artist to get parasitized too. If that time really comes, Brother Feng, I hope you won't show mercy. You must kill me. I don't want to become something as ugly as a giant worm." As he spoke, Lin Feng felt that something was amiss. Feng Xiu's face was becoming paler and paler, and his voice was dying down. His eyes in particular seemed to be faintly turning red. "Bang Xiu." Lin Feng shook Feng Xiu and realized that even Feng Xiu's gaze was becoming unfocused. However, the injuries Feng Xiu had just suffered shouldn't be lethal. How could this be? "Feng Xiu, wake up." Lin Feng's feeling that something was wrong with Feng Xiu only grew stronger. A spine-chilling vaguely occurred to him, and deep down, there was a faint hint of alarm. Bang! Without any warning, Feng Xiu's head exploded. Red and white splattered all over Lin Feng. The pungent smell of blood was still lingering in Lin Feng's nose. A fleshworm dire beast suddenly leaped out of Feng Xiu's body, and fiercely pounced towards Lin Feng to bite him as soon as it appeared. "Get lost!" Lin Feng threw a punch. The fleshworm dire beast that had just been born was smashed into pieces by the punch. Its sickly green internal organs spilled all over the floor. Feng Xiu. Lin Feng was still carrying Feng Xiu's corpse, but Feng Xiu had already lost his head. Any sign of life was long gone from his body. Feng Xiu had also been parasitized. From the moment in battle at the front line, Feng Xiu had been parasitized. It was just that it had only taken effect now. Lin Feng and Feng Xiu's friendship could not be considered profound, but being unable to do anything as he watched Feng Xiu die before his eyes gave him a feeling of powerlessness. Just like when he could only watch Shui Yuanshang and Gao Tianxi die before his eyes. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Suddenly, a strange sound appeared in Lin Feng's head. This sound seemed to be able to stir up restlessness in some kind of consciousness within his body. At the same time, the fleshworm dire beasts that were wreaking havoc on the streets stopped their frenzied killing. They pricked up their ears, as if they were listening for something. At this moment, the entire Dragonlith city fell silent. Lin Feng was still immersed in the sorrow of Feng Xiu's death, but now, his face was filled with shock. He could actually understand the strange sound just now. It appeared that a voice was summoning all the fleshworm dire beasts. Incoming. Outside the city, they're incoming. Lin Feng took a deep breath, placed Feng Xiu's corpse in a house at the roadside, and immediately rushed towards the outside of the city frantically.